On the south coast of England is the historic county of Sussex. In modern terms though, it's split from east to west. For this video, we're looking at East Sussex. What are its prettiest towns? Well, I've visited them all personally, and my conclusions are presented to you in this top 10 list. As per the rules of this series of videos, cities are included for consideration, though villages are not, as there are just too many of them. So let's get straight to it. Number 10. Just sneaking a place on this list is one of several seaside towns to feature here, Eastbourne. With a fine Victorian pier situated adjacent to various 19th century seafront buildings, and of course the carpet gardens featuring shrubs from all over the world, you may be left wondering why this town only reaches 10th place in this list. Well, the answer is in part down to the Second World War, as this was sadly one of the most heavily bombed towns in the county. As such, the architecture of today is understandably rather mixed. Number 9. Now to a town that's more expensive than London by average property price, Wadhurst. At first glance, this very much resembles a small village. Nevertheless, a royal charter from Henry III in 1253 confirms its market town status. Being surrounded by the foresty, high-weald area of outstanding natural beauty gives Wadhurst a sense of seclusion. Architectural highlights include the Grade 1 listed Church of St Peter and St Paul, dating all the way back to the 12th century, as well as a series of historic buildings along the high street. Number 8. Back to the seaside, and this time to the birthplace of British motor racing, Bexhill-on-Sea. Whilst there's no pier in Bexhill, there is the Colonnade from 1911, and behind it the Delaware Pavilion dating from 1935. In fact, the town owes much of its development to the Delaware earldom dating from the 18th century, and namesake of the American state on the east coast. As for Bexhill's motor racing connection, that comes from 1902, the year in which it became incorporated as a borough after Edward VII granted it a royal charter. To celebrate this, the 8th Earl Delaware organised a motor racing event in May of the same year. It was held on private land so as to be exempt from the national speed limit of 12 miles per hour. All in all, this is a well-preserved seaside town, and a somewhat quieter alternative to certain others in its vicinity. Number 7. Our next entry is home to around just 600 people, making it one of the smallest towns in Britain, Winchelsea. Here's an early example of a planned development. Founded in the 13th century after a storm swallowed up old Winchelsea, the town's streets are laid out in a grid formation, like a medieval Milton Keynes, if you will. The architecture is testament to its long history, with highlights including the Strand Gate from the 13th century, the Pipewell Gate from the 15th century, which replaced its predecessor that was destroyed by the French, and at the centre of it all, the Church of St Thomas the Martyr, along with its mysterious missing nave. The church, by the way, is the resting place of Spike Milligan. Number 6. Now to a seaside town with a surprising amount of history and a natural landmark of particular note, Seaford. A walk through the town centre here will soon reveal that this is not your run-of-the-mill Victorian beach resort. For starters, St Leonard's Church features a nave dating all the way back to the Norman era. But the true showstopper comes courtesy of none other than Mother Nature herself, by way of Seaford Head Nature Reserve, because from here you'll be met with views of the chalk cliffs known as the Seven Sisters, and whilst the word breathtaking is severely overused these days, it could be justifiably selected as the adjective of choice here. Number 5. Next is actually two towns that merged into one, which then became a city, Brighton and Hove. This is a place that's come a long way since the early 18th century, when Daniel Defoe described it as, quote, a poor fishing town, old built and on the very edge of the sea, end quote. But Bright Helmston, as it was then known, developed into what will become today Britain's largest seaside resort. Whilst the entertainment on offer here is numerous, this video is all about visuals, and it's no slouch in that department either. Highlights include the Palace Pier from the late 19th century, the Royal Pavilion, courtesy of a certain young prince who would later become King George IV, and a slew of white stuccoed seafront buildings, including the Grand Hotel, where a certain bellboy plied his trade in the Who's Quadrophenia movie from 1979. All in all, this seaside city is quite the visual feast, rain or shine. Number 4. Now, there is one seaside town in East Sussex that upstages Brighton in the looks department, and that town is Hastings. So, whereas most towns by the sea barely have any real history beyond the Georgian era, the history of Hastings is, in many respects, the history of England itself. As one of the original medieval sink ports, it was given tax exemptions and other favours from the Plantagenet kings in return for the ships it produced to defend its very shores. Echoes of its past are abundant in Hastings' Old Town, with its numerous historic buildings. Victorian influence is also present in its architecture, and of course Hastings Pier, originally dating from 1872. Its main claim to fame, though, is almost certainly the Battle of Hastings that took place in 1066. But here's the twist. It didn't actually take place here. It took place, in actual fact, in the neighbouring town, and by coincidence, the neighbouring town in question happens to be our number 3 entry. Number 3. And so now we head into Battle. The town of Battle, that is. So, in the year 1070, the Normans were ordered by Pope Alexander II to do penance for, well, killing so many Saxons. In response, William the Conqueror ordered the construction of an abbey where the Battle of Hastings had taken place, about 6 miles northwest of Hastings itself. The high altar of the abbey church is said to have been built on the spot where King Harold fell. The settlement that developed around it was named after the event of 1066. In addition to the surviving Abbey Gatehouse from the 14th century, there are many fine old buildings in the town where Harold Godwinson quite literally died in battle. Number 2. So the runner-up spot goes to East Sussex's county town, the town of Lewes. Set against the backdrop of the South Downs National Park, Lewes is another town with a vast history. The presence of Lewes Castle in the heart of the town itself is testament to this. One of the surviving sections of the castle is the Barbican Gates from the 14th century, just adjacent to the High Street, which is lined with many fine historic buildings of its own. Meanwhile, about half a mile from the castle is Anne of Cleves' house, which was gifted to Henry VIII's fourth wife upon their divorce, and serves as a museum today. And of course, in November, there's the annual Lewes Bonfire Night, the UK's largest Guy Fawkes night, complete with its own unique events, such as the barrel run and the procession of the Martyrs' Crosses, taking place on the historic streets of the town centre. Number 1. Sometimes picking a winner here can be a tricky job, but in this case there's one town that's simply in a league of its own, a town that's seen it all, from invasions, shipwrecks and smugglers, the town of Rye. With around 300 listed buildings, there's no shortage of architectural highlights, but of particular note are the Land Gates, the only surviving medieval gateway out of 4 which once guarded the town, and the Wipers Tower, which once overlooked the town's all-important harbour before it silted up and was replaced by farmland. Then there's the photogenic, or some might say Instagrammable, Mermaid Street, where you'll find all manner of historic buildings, like the Mermaid Inn, rebuilt in the year 1420, with cellars dating from the 12th century as they survived the French attack which destroyed its previous incarnation. And that's just scratching the surface. But in short, if cobble streets and timber-framed buildings are your thing, then you can't go wrong with a trip to Rye. Unless you wear high heels, that is. And those are my picks for prettiest towns in East Sussex. By all means, let me know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree. If you'd like to know how West Sussex compares, follow the link on the screen. Or if you'd like to catch up with all other counties I've covered so far, you can check out the playlist, also on the screen. Thanks for watching and have a great day.